When summer heat shuts down half the garden, these 17 southern crops are only getting started. Lettuce may be turning bitter, spinach may be bolting, and cilantro may be racing toward flowers. But okra, southern peas, long beans, peppers, eggplant, and several heat-loving greens can be moving into their strongest part of the season. That contrast is the reason this kind of container garden matters. You are not trying to force cool season vegetables through weather they dislike. You are changing the crop list so the weather begins working with you instead of against you. But there is an important warning before the first seed goes into a pot. A plant can love hot air and still struggle in hot, dry soil. Heat tolerance is not the same as drought-proofing, and a container makes that difference even more important. Pots warm faster than garden beds. They also lose moisture faster, especially on concrete, dark decking, or a balcony that receives reflected afternoon sun. So the goal is not simply to choose crops with southern roots. The goal is to match each crop with enough root room, steady moisture, suitable support, and a harvesting routine that keeps the plant productive. By the end of this video, you will know which okra varieties fit a small patio, which southern peas work best as bushes or climbers, which fruiting plants deserve wider containers, and which leafy crops can fill the gap when ordinary spinach gives up. You will also see why a plant can look tall and green while producing almost nothing, and how to diagnose that problem without immediately blaming the seed variety. Think of the final garden as 5 layers. Okra forms the upright layer. Yardlong beans, Malabar spinach, and Armenian cucumber use vertical support. Peppers and eggplant fill the middle with fruiting branches. New Zealand spinach spreads lower to the soil surface. Sweet potato can trail over an edge while developing below the soil. This layered plan gives every container a job, and it prevents the common mistake of filling a small space with random plants that compete for the same light, water, and walking room. Before you choose the first variety, remember this: one container mistake can reduce the harvest before the first flower opens. We will return to that mistake after comparing the 5 okras, because the best variety is not always the tallest, the fastest, or the one with the most dramatic seed packet. The best variety is the one that fits the space you actually have. Let us begin with the crop that represents southern summer gardening better than almost any other: okra. Baby Bubba okra is a logical starting point for a gardener who wants the look and harvest pattern of okra without allowing one plant to dominate a compact patio. Its appeal is not that it can be squeezed into any small pot. Its appeal is that its more manageable habit makes the whole plant easier to reach, inspect, and position. You can see the flower buds, look beneath the leaves, and find young pods before they disappear in the canopy. That matters because okra can move quickly from tender to fibrous, and a pod that was easy to use can become tough if it is overlooked. A compact plant still needs a serious root zone. Do not let the word compact tempt you to crowd several plants into a decorative pot. One well-spaced plant in a stable container is usually more useful than several stressed plants competing for moisture. The pot should not tip easily when the plant catches wind, and the drainage holes must release excess water instead of leaving the roots in a stagnant layer. Use a clean container mix rather than dense yard soil, because compacted soil can hold too much water in one area while becoming hard and dry in another. Baby Bubba is especially useful where access is limited. On a balcony, deck, or narrow walkway, a plant that stays easier to manage can be placed where you can approach it from the front without brushing past a wall of leaves. That reduces the chance of missing pods and makes pest checks simpler. Some people find the fine hairs on okra leaves and pods irritating, so long sleeves or gloves can make harvesting more comfortable. The important point is not to fear the plant, but to make the layout work for the person who will care for it. Watch the plant, rather than following a rigid watering calendar. A container exposed to wind may dry much faster than the same container in a sheltered yard. Water enough to moisten the root zone, then allow excess water to leave through the bottom. Repeatedly sprinkling only the surface can create a shallow, wet layer, while the deeper roots remain dry. On the other hand, keeping the pot constantly saturated can reduce the air roots need. Consistency is the target, not permanent wetness. For a very small patio, baby Bubba can become the upright anchor of a 4-container plan. Place the okra where it receives strong light without shading every lower crop. Add a compact hot pepper nearby. Train a yard-long bean on a separate trellis and use New Zealand spinach as the low-spreading crop. That combination creates different harvests without forcing 4 plants into one container. The next okra is less about compactness and more about familiarity, which makes it one of the easiest places for a new gardener to learn the rhythm of okra. Clemson spineless is the familiar reference point for many gardeners. It is often the kind of okra people picture when they imagine green pods standing above broad leaves in midsummer. That familiarity can be useful because it gives a beginner a clear plant to observe. You can watch the buds form, see the pale flowers open, notice the small pod behind a fading bloom, and learn how quickly that pod changes. Once you understand that sequence, okra becomes less mysterious. The word spineless refers to the pods being easier to handle than heavily spined types. But the plant can still have irritating hairs. Harvest with care, especially if your skin is sensitive. More important, do not assume that a familiar variety will forgive every container mistake. A standard okra plant needs room, bright light, and a pot that remains stable as the stem grows. If the plant is placed behind a railing, under an overhang, or where another crop blocks several hours of direct light, it may produce a great deal of leaf area without giving the flower and pod production you expected. Clemson spineless is an excellent variety for learning the value of frequent inspection. Look through the plant rather than only at the front. Pods can form close to the main stem and may be hidden by leaves. A gardener who checks only once a week may find a few pods that have become oversized and tough. Checking more often lets you harvest while the pods are still tender and also reveals aphids, whiteflies, leaf damage, or wilting before those issues become severe. Frequent harvesting is not merely about collecting food at the best stage. It also keeps you connected to the plant. Every time you remove a usable pod, you can examine the growing tip, the newest leaves, the flowers, and the moisture level of the mix. If Clemson spineless grows tall and leafy, but gives few pods, do not immediately search for a different seed packet. First, ask whether the plant receives enough sun, whether the container dries completely between waterings, whether too much nitrogen is pushing leaf growth, and whether the pot is too crowded. These questions will matter for every crop in this video. A variety can only express its strengths when the growing system supports it. This is also a good okra for the beginner garden plan at the end of the video because its role is easy to understand. It becomes the upright crop, while a bush southern pea fills another pot. A sweet pepper supplies a different fruit, and Malabar spinach climbs its own support. Each plant has separate root space, and each one can be observed without untangling a crowded mixed planting. The next variety often attracts gardeners who want a strong summer performer, but its energy makes one habit even more important. The more actively a plant grows, the more consistently you must watch moisture and young pods. Jambalaya okra is often chosen by gardeners who want vigorous growth and an active harvest rhythm during warm weather. In a container, that energy can be an advantage only when the roots have enough mix to draw from and the gardener can keep moisture reasonably steady. A fast-growing plant in a small pot can exhaust available water quickly. The same plant in a more generous, well-drained container has a larger buffer against sudden drying. Pay close attention when flowering begins. This is the stage when uneven moisture becomes especially visible. The plant may look fine in the morning, wilt hard in the afternoon, recover after watering, and repeat the cycle the next day. A little temporary afternoon droop can occur during extreme heat, but repeated severe stress is a warning that the root zone is not keeping pace with the canopy. Before watering automatically, feel the mix below the surface and consider how quickly the pot has been drying. The answer may be a deeper watering, a larger container, a layer of mulch, or a change in placement that reduces reflected heat around the pot while keeping the foliage in strong light. Do not try to solve every problem with fertilizer. When a plant slows, many gardeners reach for more food, but fertilizer cannot replace water, root room, or sunlight. Too much nitrogen can create a lush green plant that looks impressive from across the patio while producing fewer flowers than expected. The better approach is to make one correction at a time. Confirm light, confirm drainage, confirm that the root zone is being wetted thoroughly. Then, use a balanced feeding approach appropriate for containers rather than repeatedly pushing leafy growth. Jambalaya also rewards a gardener who can inspect pods frequently. Vigorous plants can hide growth behind large leaves, so move around the container if possible and look from more than one angle. Harvesting at a useful stage protects eating quality and prevents a few overlooked pods from becoming the only thing you notice when you finally inspect the plant closely. This variety fits a gardener who enjoys an active relationship with the crop. It is not a plant to place in the hottest corner and forget because the label says heat-loving. Heat gives it the conditions to grow, but management turns that growth into harvest. That distinction is one of the main lessons of this video. Now we move to an okra that changes the visual character of the garden. Its deep red color makes it stand out immediately, but the most useful reason to include it is not decoration alone. It can help you see how variety choice should add both function and diversity without changing the basic rules of good container culture. Red burgundy okra brings deep color into a garden that may otherwise be dominated by green leaves and green pods. The stems and pods can create a strong contrast beside peppers, eggplant, and leafy vines, which makes this variety especially attractive in a visible patio garden. But color should never distract from structure. Red burgundy still needs strong light, sufficient root room, steady moisture, and regular harvesting. Because the plant looks distinctive, it is tempting to treat it as an ornamental feature and allow pods to remain for visual effect. That can be useful if seed saving is the goal and the variety is suitable for it, but it works against the purpose of a kitchen garden when usable pods are left until they become fibrous. Decide what the plant is for. If the goal is fresh harvests, inspect it as regularly as the green varieties. If a pod is being left to mature for seed, recognize that the plant will direct energy differently and that the pod will no longer be useful in the same way as a tender young one. Red foliage and pods can also change how you inspect the plant. Dark stems may make some damage less obvious from a distance, while pale pests or residue may stand out clearly. Look beneath leaves and along the newest growth. Avoid reacting to every small insect with a harsh treatment. First, identify whether the insect is causing damage, whether natural predators are present, and whether a simple physical control or improved airflow is enough. Container gardens are small systems, so unnecessary spraying can affect beneficial insects as well as pests. A container at the back edge of a patio can work if you can still reach around it. Placing okra tightly against a wall may make pods on the hidden side difficult to find and can reduce air movement. Leave enough space to walk, turn, and inspect the plants safely. Red burgundy is a good reminder that a productive food garden can also be visually beautiful. The deep pods, okra flowers, glossy pepper fruit, purple eggplant, and red-veined Malabar spinach stems can create a layered display without sacrificing utility. Yet, every attractive plant still needs a practical harvesting path. The final okra in this group is a more demanding choice for small spaces. Cowhorn okra can make a dramatic upright statement, but it proves why vigor must be matched with room. The largest plant is not automatically the most productive choice for a container gardener. Cowhorn okra belongs in the plan only when the gardener has enough space for a larger plant and a container stable enough to support it. Its strong growth can be impressive in an open yard, a wide patio, or the back of a container arrangement. In a narrow balcony, however, the same plant can block a walkway, shade smaller crops, catch wind, and make harvesting awkward. Choosing it successfully begins with honest measurement, not enthusiasm alone. Look upward and outward before planting. Where will the mature stem and leaves go? Will they cover the railing view, touch a roof overhang, or push into a path? Will the container be exposed to strong gusts? A top-heavy plant in a lightweight pot can become dangerous or simply frustrating. A broad, stable container placed where it cannot be knocked over is more important than adding extra decorative height. Then look below the soil. A larger canopy demands a root system capable of supplying water during heat. If the pot is undersized, the gardener may be forced into repeated emergency watering while the plant cycles between wilt and recovery. That pattern is hard on flowers and developing pods. A larger volume of quality container mix provides a steadier environment, though it does not eliminate the need to monitor moisture. Cowhorn also teaches the importance of garden orientation. Put tall crops where they will not steal light from peppers, eggplant, or low greens. A trellis, wall, neighboring building, or balcony above can change the light pattern. Move empty containers around before planting and watch where shadows fall. If the plant becomes large, harvesting access matters even more. Do not let branches and leaves form a barrier between you and the pods. Keep the area around the pot clear, inspect from multiple sides, and avoid allowing other vines to climb the okra stem. Yard-long beans and Malabar spinach may happily grab any support they find, but letting them tangle through okra makes both crops harder to manage. Cowhorn may be a rewarding choice for the gardener with room, while baby bubba may be wiser for the gardener with only a few square feet. Neither is universally better. They solve different design problems. This is the point where variety selection becomes garden planning. Now that the 5 okras are clear, we can address the system that determines whether any of them merely survives or continues producing. Changing the seed variety may not fix a weak harvest. The container itself may already be setting the limit before the first pod appears. A productive container begins with drainage, but drainage is only one part of the system. A pot with no effective exit for excess water can leave roots deprived of oxygen and vulnerable to decline. A pot with excellent drainage but too little volume can swing from soaked to dry in a few hours. The goal is a root environment that drains freely, while holding enough moisture to carry the plant through the hottest part of the day. Use a container mix made for pots, rather than filling a container with heavy soil dug from the yard. Garden soil can compact, drain unevenly, and become extremely heavy. A quality mix contains materials that create air spaces while retaining useful moisture. Over time, container mix settles and organic material breaks down. So an old pot may need refreshing instead of simply receiving another plant on top of exhausted roots and compacted material. Container shape matters. Upright plants such as okra benefit from depth and stability. Bushy plants such as peppers and eggplant need enough width for roots and enough base weight to keep the pot balanced. Spreading greens need surface area. Sweet potato needs meaningful soil volume below its vines. A climber may grow in a pot that looks adequate at first, but the combined weight of wet soil, foliage, fruit, and a trellis must remain secure. Dark containers on concrete or asphalt can become much warmer than the surrounding air. This does not mean every dark pot must be discarded. It means placement deserves attention. A pot can be moved slightly away from a heat-reflecting wall, raised so drainage holes remain open, grouped so the sides receive some protection without crowding the foliage, or shaded at the container level while the leaves continue receiving sun. The solution should reduce root zone stress without turning a sun-loving plant into a shade plant. Mulch can slow surface evaporation and reduce abrupt temperature changes in the upper mix. Use a clean material and leave a little breathing room around the main stem rather than piling mulch tightly against it. Mulch is not a substitute for watering, and it can make the surface look moist after the deeper mix has begun to dry. Check below it. Watering by the clock is less reliable than observing the container. Morning is often a practical time because the plant begins the day with available moisture, but weather, wind, pot size, and plant size determine actual need. Insert a finger into the mix. Use the weight of the pot when practical, and watch how quickly the plant changes. When watering, apply enough to moisten the root zone. A quick splash can encourage roots near the surface and leave dry pockets below. Water slowly so the mix has time to absorb moisture. If water runs immediately down the side and out the bottom, the mix may have pulled away from the container wall or become difficult to re-wet. Apply water in stages rather than flooding the pot and assuming the job is finished. At the same time, Do not keep a saucer permanently full beneath vegetables, unless the growing method was specifically designed for that reservoir. Roots need air. Persistent saturation can produce symptoms that look surprisingly similar to drought, wilting, yellowing, and weak growth. Always ask what the mix feels like before adding more water. Crowding is another hidden limit. More plants do not automatically mean more food. Several okras in one undersized pot may create an impressive wall of leaves, while each plant competes for water and nutrients. Dense foliage also makes it harder to find pods, inspect leaf undersides, and maintain airflow. Give each large crop its own root space, unless you are using a carefully planned combination with compatible sizes and needs. Feeding should support production rather than chase leaf color. Container plants depend on a limited volume of mix, so nutrients must be replenished. But excess nitrogen can push soft, leafy growth at the expense of the balance you want. Follow a measured, balanced approach suitable for edible container crops. Observe the plant after feeding instead of adding more, simply because a small amount seemed helpful. Finally, plan support before growth becomes tangled. A trellis installed after yard-long beans or Armenian cucumber have sprawled across neighboring pots can damage stems and turn a clean layout into a knot. Place the support, confirm that the container cannot tip, and guide vines early. Once the container works with the plant instead of against it, the next group can add food vertically without taking another row of patio floor. That brings us from upright okra to southern peas and beans. These crops change the garden in two ways. First, they provide a different kind of harvest, from tender pods to fresh peas or mature dry beans, depending on the crop and the stage you choose. Second, some of them use vertical space that would otherwise remain empty, but the group is more diverse than the word pea suggests. So always check whether a particular variety grows as a bush, a semi-vining plant, or a strong climber. Black-eyed peas are one of the clearest connections between a hot weather garden and southern cooking. In a container plan, the first decision is growth habit. A bush form can fit a broad pot and remain easier to manage, while a vining form needs support and a position where it will not shade everything below. Do not crowd seedlings because they look delicate at first. Their roots and foliage will expand, and good spacing makes flowers, pods, and leaf surfaces easier to inspect. Black-eyed peas can be harvested according to how you plan to use them. Some gardeners pick pods while the peas are fresh and tender. Others allow them to mature further for shelling or drying. The longer pods remain, the more the plant moves towards seed maturity. So decide whether your goal is repeated fresh harvests or mature seed. There is no single correct stage for every kitchen, but there should be a clear intention. Water at the soil level when possible, and keep the root zone from cycling through severe drought. Plants in containers cannot explore surrounding soil for moisture. At the same time, avoid keeping the foliage wet for long periods when heat and humidity favor disease. Air movement and spacing are simple forms of prevention. Check the newest growth and the undersides of leaves, especially when the plant suddenly looks sticky, curled, or weak. Crowder peas offer another southern pea option, often valued for their full peas packed tightly inside the pod. In the garden, however, the name alone does not tell you the complete growth habit. Read the description of the specific variety. A gardener who assumes every crowder pea stays compact may discover vines reaching into nearby okra or peppers. Install support early when it is needed, and give a bush type enough width rather than treating it as a tiny plant. The useful question is not which southern pea is universally best. It is which one matches the way your family eats. If you enjoy fresh-shelled peas, choose and harvest with that purpose in mind. If you want dry peas for storage, allow selected pods to mature fully and protect them from prolonged wet weather near the end. If you mainly want tender pods, another bean may serve you better. Growing what you will actually cook is one of the simplest ways to make a small garden productive. Cream peas add another choice in flavor and texture. They are useful for the gardener who wants variety without turning the patio into a collection of crops that all do the same job. A single well-managed container can be more valuable than several neglected pots. Choose a cream pea variety with a growth habit suited to your support system. Give it strong light and harvest according to the stage you prefer. This crop also illustrates why labels such as heat tolerant need context. Heat may help the plant grow, but flowering and pod development still respond to moisture, nutrition, and stress. If the plant blooms and repeatedly drops flowers, check the root zone before adding fertilizer. If foliage is dense and dark green but pods are scarce, review light and nitrogen. If pods develop only on the outer edge, the interior may be too crowded or shaded. Yard-long beans create the strongest vertical effect in this group. Their long pods are visually dramatic, but the real advantage is how the vines use height. A sturdy trellis behind the container can turn a narrow strip of patio into a productive wall. Install the trellis first. Once the vines have wrapped through neighboring plants, separating them can break stems and disturb flowers. Guide young vines toward their own support. Do not let them climb okra simply because the okra stem is available. The bean may reach the light, but harvesting becomes difficult, and the combined foliage can reduce airflow around both plants. Keep the trellis where it will not cast a heavy shadow across peppers, eggplant, or low greens. In many spaces, the back or less sun-sensitive edge works, but observe your actual light pattern. Yard-long bean pods should be checked regularly. Their name can encourage gardeners to wait for maximum length, yet tenderness and intended use matter more than winning a size contest. Pick while the pods still have the texture you want. Regular picking also brings you close enough to notice chewing damage, hidden aphids, or vines that have escaped the support. A vigorous vine may grow beyond the top or sides of the trellis. Redirect it gently while stems are flexible. If necessary, prune lightly and deliberately, rather than allowing the vine to cover a door, railing, or neighboring crop. The goal is productive growth inside a manageable boundary. Bush lima beans are useful when you want a bean harvest without another tall trellis. The word bush, however, does not mean the crop belongs in a tiny pot. A mature bush needs width, root room, airflow, and access from the side. Place the container in the middle layer of the garden, where the plant receives good light but does not block lower greens. Lima beans can be sensitive to stress during flowering and pod set, so steady care matters. Avoid letting the container become extremely dry and then flooding it. Avoid repeated heavy feeding that creates leaves at the expense of a balanced plant. Observe the flowers, the tiny developing pods, and the overall posture of the foliage. A plant tells a story over several days, not in one isolated afternoon. As with the other peas and beans, harvest stage depends on intended use. Learn what a filled pod looks and feels like for the variety you chose. Do not rely only on calendar days, because temperature, light, and plant health affect development. Keep records if you grow the crop again. A note about which container, location, and harvest stage worked can be more valuable next season than a new packet of seeds. Together, black-eyed peas, crowder peas, cream peas, yard-long beans, and bush lima beans create a complete bean layer. Some stay lower, some climb. Some are grown for fresh peas, some for mature seed, and some for long, tender pods. They solve different needs, which is why they should not be crowded into one category or one container. Vertical crops solve the floor space problem, but the next group shows why a wider container can sometimes be more valuable than a taller one. With the trellis producing above the garden, we can fill the middle layer with fruiting plants that thrive in sustained summer warmth. Eggplant fills the middle layer with broad leaves, strong branches, and fruit that can become heavy enough to change the balance of the plant. It is a warm season crop, but that does not mean it should be pushed into the smallest available pot. A wide, stable container gives the roots room and reduces the chance that the plant will tip when fruit develops on one side. Choose a container-sized or smaller fruited variety when space is limited, and understand that different eggplants can have very different shapes and habits. A compact plant with smaller fruit may be easier to support on a balcony than a large, spreading plant. Whatever the variety, place a stake or small cage early if support may be needed. Waiting until a loaded branch bends toward the ground makes the job harder and can damage roots or stems. Large green leaves can create the illusion of success, even when the plant is producing few flowers or fruit. Look beyond leaf size. Is the plant receiving enough direct light? Is the pot drying severely? Are blossoms dropping after a cycle of stress? Is excessive nitrogen encouraging foliage? Are flea beetles or other pests damaging leaves? One symptom rarely provides the entire answer, so inspect the complete system. When fruit begins to form, support branches before they are strained. Harvest according to the type of eggplant and the quality you want, rather than leaving fruit to become oversized. A glossy, firm fruit at a useful stage is generally a better kitchen harvest than an impressive but over-mature one. Removing usable fruit also gives you another reason to inspect the plant closely. Hot peppers are another strong middle layer crop. Their advantage in containers is the possibility of repeated harvests from a plant that can remain relatively compact, but variety choice matters. Some hot peppers stay neat and bushy, others become taller or wider. Read the mature size and choose a container that matches it rather than assuming every pepper belongs in the same pot. Peppers enjoy warm conditions, yet inconsistent moisture can still affect flowers and fruit. A pot that dries to the point of severe wilt and is then heavily watered may keep the plant alive without giving it the stable conditions needed for steady production. Mulch, adequate soil volume, and careful observation help reduce that swing. During heat waves, check more often, especially after the plant has developed a large canopy. Do not confuse heat-loving fruit with sunburn-proof fruit. Leaves normally shade developing peppers, so avoid removing large amounts of healthy foliage simply to make the fruit more visible. Sudden exposure can leave fruit vulnerable to intense sun. Pruning should have a clear purpose, not be done because a plant looks crowded in a photograph. Hot peppers also require thoughtful placement around children and pets. The fruit may be colorful and attractive, and residue from handling can irritate eyes or skin. Harvest carefully and wash hands or gloves. The garden should be productive and safe. Sweet peppers fill a similar structural role but serve a different kitchen purpose. They can be harvested green or allowed to develop mature color, depending on variety and preference. Leaving fruit longer on the plant requires more time and continued care, so balance the desire for color with the plant's condition and the length of the season. Like hot peppers, sweet peppers may need support when branches carry several fruits. A small cage or stake, placed early, is easier than trying to tie a bent plant later. Keep the center open enough for observation, but do not strip healthy leaves. Check where branches join the main stem because heavy fruit can create leverage in wind. If sweet pepper plants remain leafy but flower poorly, review the same fundamentals: light, root room, water consistency, and nutrient balance. If flowers appear but fruit set is weak during extreme weather, give the plant time and maintain good care rather than applying one aggressive fix after another. Conditions can improve, and a healthy plant may resume production. Armenian cucumber changes the shape of this middle layer because it is a vine rather than a bush. Botanically, it is closely related to muskmelon, but in the garden and kitchen, it is generally handled like a cucumber. Its long vines need an intentional root. A strong trellis keeps fruit cleaner, improves visibility, and saves floor space, but only if the structure is secure. Install support before planting or transplanting. Guide the vine while it is young. If it reaches toward yardlong beans or Malabar spinach, redirect it so each crop maintains its own lane. Several aggressive vines, sharing one small trellis, can shade one another and create a dense wall where fruit and pests remain hidden. Check Armenian cucumber fruit frequently and harvest at the stage that provides the texture and flavor you prefer. Allowing every fruit to become extremely large can reduce quality and make the trellis harder to manage. The goal is not maximum visual size. It is a useful, repeated harvest from a healthy vine. Watch the lower leaves and the base of the vine. Good airflow, clean containers, and watering at the root zone can reduce the time foliage stays wet. If disease appears, remove badly affected material carefully and avoid spreading it from plant to plant with wet hands or tools. Do not crowd the container with unrelated crops just because the trellis creates open space above. At this point, The garden contains upright okra, peas and beans, fruiting bushes, and another productive vine. It may look complete, but summer meals still need leaves, and ordinary spinach is no longer the best tool for that job. The final group fills the hottest season gap with edible greens, spreading vines, and a harvest that develops below the soil. Sweet potato is often treated as a single crop, but in a container garden, it performs several jobs at once. The vines create a low, spreading layer. They can trail over the rim of a pot, soften a hard patio edge, and cover open space that might otherwise heat quickly. Below the surface, the plant needs enough soil volume and time to develop storage roots. A mass of beautiful foliage does not guarantee a large underground harvest, so evaluate the plant as both a vine and a root crop. Use a broad, substantial container and a loose, well-drained mix. The container should allow the vines to grow without becoming a tripping hazard or crawling through every neighboring pot. Guide them along an edge, or let them trail where they will not be stepped on. If vines begin to cover peppers or low greens, redirect them early. A small adjustment while the stems are flexible is easier than untangling a thick mat later. Avoid overfeeding with nitrogen. Sweet potato foliage can become extremely vigorous when pushed, but excessive leafy growth is not the same as balanced root development. Maintain steady moisture during establishment, then continue observing the container rather than keeping it saturated. The plant tolerates heat well, but the root zone still needs air and consistent access to water. Do not dig repeatedly to check for roots, because disturbance can damage developing storage roots. Let the plant grow through the season appropriate for your area, and keep expectations realistic. Container size, variety, planting time, warmth, and season length all influence the final underground result. Even when the root harvest is modest, the vines can still contribute useful edible leaves when the variety and preparation are appropriate, though gardeners should follow reliable food safety guidance for the crop they grow. Malabar spinach supplies the vertical leafy layer. Despite its common name, it is not ordinary cool season spinach. It is a warm season vine with thick leaves and succulent stems, and it becomes more relevant just when true spinach is struggling. That makes it one of the most satisfying transitions in a summer container garden. Instead of trying to stop spinach from bolting, you replace the role with a plant adapted to heat. Give Malabar spinach its own support. It can climb a narrow trellis, arch, or strings, but it should not be allowed to smother yard-long beans, Armenian cucumber, or okra. Guide young shoots and harvest leaves and tender tips in a way that encourages branching without stripping the plant bare. Frequent light harvesting is usually more useful than waiting and removing a large amount at once. The leaves have a different texture from ordinary spinach, especially when cooked, so present the crop honestly. It is a heat-loving green with its own qualities, not a perfect imitation. Gardeners who enjoy it gain a dependable leafy option during hot weather, and a vine that can make a bare trellis visually full. Because Malabar spinach grows rapidly in warmth, monitor the base of the plant and the support. A trellis that seems strong enough for a seedling may become strained when covered with wet foliage. Make sure the container and structure remain secure. Keep access open so you can harvest from both sides, and notice damaged leaves before the vine becomes dense. New Zealand spinach completes the low leafy layer. It is also not true spinach, but it can provide edible leaves during warm conditions when ordinary spinach is unreliable. Its habit is lower and more spreading than Malabar spinach, which makes it useful near the front of the arrangement, or in a broad container where stems can branch outward. Give it room rather than treating it as a tiny filler. A spreading plant can cover the soil surface, but it can also crowd the base of a pepper or compete with another crop if planted too closely. In a small garden, separate containers are often easier to manage because each plant can be watered, fed, and harvested according to its own needs. Harvest tender growth regularly, while leaving enough foliage for the plant to continue. As with any unfamiliar edible green, identify the plant correctly and follow appropriate preparation guidance. The value of New Zealand spinach is not that it tastes exactly like common spinach. Its value is that it fills a similar menu role during weather that common spinach dislikes. Together, sweet potato, Malabar spinach, and New Zealand spinach complete the layered plan. One trails and develops below the soil. One climbs and supplies leaves vertically. One spreads lower and fills the front. But before choosing the final combination, there is one last diagnostic step that can save an entire container from spending the summer green but unproductive. When a container plant looks healthy from a distance but produces little food, diagnose it in a consistent order. Start with light, count the hours of direct sun the plant actually receives now, not what the space received earlier in the season. A growing trellis, a tall okra, a roof edge, or a neighboring building may have changed the pattern. If flowers and fruiting branches remain in shade for much of the day, move the container when practical or rearrange the taller crops. Next, examine the pot. Is it large enough for the mature plant, or was it chosen for the seedling? Does water run straight out because the mix has become difficult to re-wet? Does the container remain soaked long after watering? Are roots emerging through drainage holes or circling near the surface? You do not need to pull the plant apart to learn from these signs. Then review moisture. Severe wilting, followed by emergency watering, is different from steady care. Check below mulch and below the dry-looking surface. If the deeper mix is still wet, more water may make the problem worse. If only the top inch has been moistened repeatedly, the deeper root zone may be dry. Adjust the method, not just the frequency. Look at nutrition after light and water. A very leafy plant with few flowers may have received more nitrogen than it can use for balanced production. An exhausted mix may also need measured feeding. Use an appropriate container fertilizer according to its directions and give the plant time to respond. Do not stack several products together because results are not immediate. Check density and airflow. Leaves packed tightly together can hide pods, pests, and disease. Roots may be competing below, even when the tops look separate. Remove weak extra seedlings early, rather than forcing all of them to struggle. Keep vines on their own supports, and prevent sweet potato stems from covering every neighboring pot. Review harvesting. Search the entire okra plant for old pods. Look behind yardlong bean leaves. Check peppers and eggplant from the back as well as the front. Fruit that remains too long can reduce eating quality and can change how the plant allocates energy. Frequent harvesting also reveals new problems before they become serious. Inspect pests carefully. Turn over several leaves, especially the newest and the most damaged. Look along stems, flower buds, and young fruit. Identify the problem before treating it. Use the least disruptive, effective method and protect pollinators. Finally, consider root zone heat and expectations. A pot on blazing concrete beside a reflective wall may experience more stress than a similar pot in open air. Move it slightly, shield the container side, or reduce reflected heat without depriving the foliage of needed sun, and ask whether the variety truly fits the space and season. A large cowhorn okra cannot be expected to behave like baby bubba. A long-season root crop cannot be rushed by extra fertilizer. Once these limits are removed, you do not need all 17 crops. You only need the right combination for your space. Here are 3 simple plans that turn the long list into a practical summer garden. For the smallest patio, use baby bubba okra as the upright anchor, a yard-long bean on a secure trellis, 1 compact hot pepper in a separate pot, and New Zealand spinach as the low green. Keep each root system separate and arrange the trellis so it does not shade the pepper. For a beginner-friendly garden, choose Clemson spineless okra, a bush black-eyed pea, 1 sweet pepper, and Malabar spinach on its own support. These plants provide clear, different harvests and teach the essential habits of checking moisture, guiding vines, supporting fruiting branches, and harvesting frequently. For maximum diversity, combine jambalaya or red burgundy okra with yard-long beans, eggplant, Armenian cucumber, sweet potato, and Malabar spinach. This plan needs more room and stronger supports, but it can provide pods, peas, peppers, or eggplant-like fruiting rolls, cucumbers, leafy greens, and an underground crop from a layered arrangement. A productive summer container garden does not come from forcing cool season vegetables through extreme heat. It comes from choosing crops that welcome summer, giving their roots enough room, keeping moisture and nutrition balanced, and harvesting often enough to keep the garden moving forward. Choose one upright crop, one climber, one fruiting bush, and one heat-loving green. Start with the containers you can manage well, not the largest list you can fit. When each plant has a clear place and a clear purpose, the hottest weeks of summer can become the season when your small garden finally looks full, useful, and alive.